So thank you, everybody. I'm joined by my colleagues, Kate Derrington and Cristy Bartlett today. So they'll come in at different points through the presentation. Just making sure it's all working. The University of Southern Queensland would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we all gather today. We would also like to pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. So who are we at the University of Southern Queensland? We're a regional university with over 27,000 students. We've got three main on-campus campuses, our Toowoomba, Springfield and Ipswich campuses, and we also have some learning hubs in Geraldton, Stanthorpe, and we have our Mount Kent Observatory. The majority of our students are actually online though. Most of them are mature age, first in family, low socioeconomic status, and from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds. So why does this make a difference? Well, we want to make sure that we are supporting these students. So before the pandemic, I'm going to focus a lot on maths in this case because I'm the maths learning advisor, but we did a lot of 30-minute consultations for mathematics. We in our team are actually part of the library at this point. So we are there to help students across all of our campuses and all of our modes of study. So students did tend to either have book 2 in a week or sometimes 30 minutes was all they needed. We were very well utilised for consultations. We're doing the same with our academic language and learning consultations as well, particularly in health. We were very, very well booked. Consultations for the language side of things were 60 minutes, not 30 minutes. We also instigated some online and on-campus drop-in sessions, and without having any hook to bring students in, we weren't getting a lot of students, sometimes none in the hour session. And at this point, we had our health and our engineering discipline learning advisors and librarians were developing a program called Online Study Support. So that these sessions had they were 1 hour and they were able to help us have a hook to bring students in. But why were we doing all this? So we know that online enrolment is an increasing trend, and particularly through the pandemic when most things across Australia and Queensland went online. We also know that online students are at a higher rate of attrition, and they can feel undervalued, feel like second-class citizens, and they can feel invisible as well. So in the higher education sector, we're familiar with the importance of belonging and concepts such as traditional pedagogy. However, our questions were, while we were setting this up, is what do these look like for online students, and how do we as library staff support students when we're not embedded or visible in the core teaching across the semester? Did you want to add anything here, Kate?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Anita. So hi, everyone. I'm Kate. I'm one of the learning advisors, not for maths. I work in the other areas, and I'm tied with the health faculty. So Anita's right. We recognise the fact that students, were sort of a bit invisible, and we were trying to find ways to support them, more in this online space to sort of prevent the attrition and build on the retention. So what this looks like, we had been developing this program, so it just seemed logical and equitable and accessible to bring the maths students on board as well, because they weren't part of the original online study support program. So COVID kind of, ramped it up, I suppose. And if you wanted to just go to the next slide, maybe Anita, that would be good. We'll just see where we're at with that. Okay. So what we were doing, although they had the students, although they had access to the sessions online, we were running them, as as webinars, and there just wasn't that opportunity for all the interaction. So we wanted to try and embed a little bit more into that. So what we were doing at the time, though, it was a semester-long program. So essentially, it was just extending what we were doing in orientation. So it was recognising the fact that transition pedagogy works on the principles that, it's not just this one-shot inoculation. You don't just, do orientation and then just forget about it. So we wanted to extend that over the life of the whole semester. So we ran multiple sessions, multiple iterations of some of those sessions, so that students could dip in and out of the program, when they needed it. So it was that sort of just-in-time approach. There were, as I said, multiple opportunities to catch some of the more popular sessions. So particularly things like referencing, the academic writing we were offering multiple times. And then we had some more specialist topics around particular aspects of writing, for instance. So we might have something on report writing or reflective writing, things that were more sort of niche, I suppose. The format was online. It was 1 hour. There was a smaller component given to the content. So it might have been, say, 15, maybe 20 minutes worth of actual content, which we saw as the hook. And then plenty of opportunity for students to discuss whatever they needed to around that, or anything else. So there was a very heavy emphasis on, you don't only have to stick to, what we're teaching this particular week, ask us anything. So it was that real emphasis on, wanting students to feel like it was a space where they could come and, and belong, feel welcome and not feel silly to ask anything. So just a way to really to build that engagement. So there are several things that informed this. So a couple of years earlier, Kathy Stone's National Guidelines for Improving Student Online Learning had come out. So we used that. We used 4 of those guidelines to inform what we were doing. We picked the ones that we felt we had some influence over. Some of the guidelines are more at an institutional level, and in our position in the library, we weren't in a space to influence decisions around those. We also drew very heavily on transition pedagogy, and we've got a bit more on the slides following. And we also focused very heavily on the learning advisor and librarian partnerships. So the learning advisor team always collaborate very closely with our librarian colleagues. We work in discipline sort of support teams. And so we were conscious of always having a member from both of those teams in the session, so that, again, it didn't matter what students, were coming to ask about. They could, we had both levels of both sorts of expertise there. Okay, thanks, Anita. We'll just see what's on the next one. We'll go from there. Okay, so these are the guidelines. These were Stone's guidelines that we picked, that we used. So there was the idea about the early intervention. So we tried to address students' expectations, that whole idea of, you don't know what you don't know. So trying to sort of bust some of those myths, try and meet their expectations, try and dampen down some of that, hysteria that students sometimes experience when they're first coming to uni, and try and build up that confidence of studying in that new environment, trying to normalise it, making sure that, students didn't feel just totally overwhelmed. And that was going to always translate very nicely into maths, I suppose, around those notions of maths anxiety and so on. So there were, definite synergies there. So trying to explain expectations, introducing students to the wide range of services, because not everybody comes to orientation, and even students who do come to orientation, their heads are exploding by about, the end of that week. They don't remember all of that stuff. So it's another opportunity to, implant those messages. And these were some of some of the feedback that we got there. So students just sort of saying, this was just perfect. I just got accepted for my master's and I really want to get started. I saw this in orientation and I thought, this was the perfect thing for me to come to. We looked at guideline 4, which was about explicitly valuing and supporting the vital role of teacher presence. So we made sure that, we really showed up each time. It wasn't just, numbly going through the slides and, presenting content. There was no reading off the slides. We made things very engaging and student-centred. So there's a few comments there. I'm not going to read through all of this because I'm conscious of time and that we've got a lot to get on with. We presented engaging and supportive content and delivery. So it was more of a facilitation style, always being conscious of trying to find out, who was in the session. So it's not, we've turned up to present the session on blah, and you're just racing through the content. I know, in those sessions, certainly the ones that I run, and I'm pretty sure everybody else does it the same way, is trying to find out, who's in the room. And we get a real variety of students. So I'm from health, but, if there's students there from engineering or business or whatever, just trying to contextualize things so that generic content has some meaning for those students. And surprisingly, we always seem to get a healthy dose of postgrad and even PhD students, which we'll always point out to them that it is pitched at an undergrad level and that they are very welcome to stay. And even though, we might expect them all to drop off, 10 minutes into the presentation thinking it's not for them, they invariably stay and give us comments like, this is really good reinforcement. It's just even reinforcing the good practice that I've already built up. So that was sort of nice commentary for us to get. And the final one is contact and communicate throughout the student journey. So we get a lot of frequent flyers, students who come repeatedly throughout the semester. They dip in and out of the content as they need to, and they they're really engaged. They're sort of saying, I'll see you next week. I was at your session on, reading and note-taking last week, and I found it really useful. So they're giving us that constant feedback that they're finding the sessions helpful and that they're going to come again. So they're checking in with us. Thanks, Anita. This is just a bit of, again, student feedback, mapping it to the transition pedagogy principles. So we tried to look at it from the whole of institutions. So referring students to other services around the university. And students were giving us that feedback saying that they were going to book appointments with, I think in this instance was a librarian. We certainly got feedback that it extended orientation period. And students were sort of saying, thanks for that recommendation. I've gone on to do these other things like looking at MOOCs. We were de-emphasising the deficit model. That's very much an emphasis. It's not, you've come to this because you're lacking. And again, that's, obviously going to have synergies with maths. Focusing on that just in time. In this instance, it was an honours student who was saying, that's down the track, but I really needed to do this now. And she ended up being one of our very regular attenders. There was a curriculum focus, intentional curriculum focus. So this person who was just really worried about doing everything correctly. She wanted to make sure that she was learning how to do everything. And again, that academic and social belonging. So those students who said to us, we felt really overwhelmed, but each week, little by little, as I come back and touch base with this program, I'm feeling more reassured as I'm going through. And then this was a nice one, the students who say to us, it's humorous and fun and, a great sense of joy that the presenters are bringing to this program. So it's not seen as this kind of stuffy, boring thing that I have to do each week. I actually want to come to the program. And then the last little one before I stop and hand back to Anita, next one, I think, thanks. This is just how it maps to the third area we looked at, which was the online engagement framework, which is by Patria Redmond, who's a colleague of ours at UniSQ. It's how we use the university, the learning advisor and librarian partnerships. So we tried, to have a very collaborative approach to our presentation. And you can see there some of the comments that students gave us. So students are sort of saying, that they want to encourage, that the students themselves are sort of saying, that yes, they felt it was very social, that the presenters really listened to what the students were saying, and they could provide very warm and genuine responses in their in the way they responded to students. There was that very active approach to responses as well. Okay, I can just see a little question popping up there. So the discipline-specific questions, yeah, you do need to think on your feet a little bit with that. I mean, we do have discipline-specific areas that we, are aligned with. But I think we've all been around long enough. We're all fairly experienced in our areas, and we've, sort of taught into other areas. So I know in my previous institution, I was still with health, but we had something a little bit similar to this where we had drop-in sessions and we could get anybody from anywhere. So it's just that content knowledge that you build up from, seeing lots of other assignments. So I suppose just trying to say, okay, in your area, so for instance, with referencing, if somebody is from business and, they have Harvard, just pointing out that we may be talking about APA referencing, but in the business faculty, you would need to be aware that you use a different referencing system. So just pointing things out to them like that, or being aware of the sorts of assessment pieces that might crop up in a different genre. So for instance, case studies in the health disciplines, whereas it may be a report genre in business. So just being aware of some of the nuances of the specific disciplines, not in huge amounts of detail, and also referring them, making sure that they're aware to ask those questions of their tutors, opening up those dialogues in their specific disciplines. That's the important thing to do. Okay, thanks, Anita. I think it's probably back to you now. Back to the maths.
So yeah, back to me. So as I said earlier, at the beginning of 2020, we had an online maths drop-in each week because 75% of our students were online. We chose to only do a drop-in online. And then it didn't matter that the world closed down in March. We also did 3 sessions, one on each campus, of a general study support drop-in sessions where there was a maths person along with a librarian and a discipline learning advisor at each of those. Once again, they didn't have very many people come along to them. And when everything closed down, we switched those to be online. We put the links on the library website and we promoted them through any engagement we had with students. So through our consultations, through any workshops or anything we did in courses. So it still didn't have a lot of uptake. The sessions I was at, there were students who I'd seen in an earlier consultation and they had follow-up questions to ask me. So they popped along and we went into a little breakout room in Zoom and they asked their questions and then they went off and continued with their studies. Our consultations also skyrocketed at the second half of semester 1, 2020, as students were looking for other ways of getting help. So they were asking their lecturers, they were coming to the library, particularly in maths. I had a lot of consultations were coming through. But in semester 2, we in consultation with Cristy and Kate, we went with, well, the generic drop-ins aren't working, particularly for maths. Can I get on board with the online study support program and can I develop a maths version of this? So we didn't have enough learning advisors, the maths learning advisors, to offer multiple sessions across the week. We just did one online study support session on a specific maths topic. We actually made sure that we mapped what courses were being studied in each semester, what were the typical questions we were getting throughout the semester to formulate what our program was going to be. So, and we run it the same. We had a dedicated little snippet. I limited myself to 5 slides on any topic. And then we could have the dedicated time for the students to ask questions. So here I go, the 5 content slides. It gave us an opportunity for students to ask questions on any other maths topic. We actually had a lot of sharing within the students with the learning advisors. So there were things when I was talking about, say, how to type maths in Word, students went, oh, I found that you could do this and I can do that. You don't have to press Shift Enter every time in the new versions. It will all work for you and we could learn from each other. So I took away things from different sessions. We also had at the end of our main slide deck what the other online study support options were. So the fact that they could go to the writing-based or studies-based ones. There was our peer learning of coordinator and what peer learning might be available in their courses. all the different other things that they could access 24/7 when they weren't in a session with us. And we also had a lot of questions prepared at the end of the session. So if students go, yeah, I do actually want to learn more about triangles or probability or things like that, we actually had exercises that we could work through together if things seemed to just sort of peter out and there was no other questions that students were bringing with us. So I've got a little slide, a comment of a slide that we had during the session and some exercises with the worked examples we could work through afterwards. And we actually got the students to do problems. So they weren't just passively watching what was going on, they were actually engaging in the sessions. And we also had feedback from different students at different points saying, tell us more in the blurb when we're signing up each week. So we put in, actually, like when you're doing a mastering the calculator session, bring your calculator because I'm going to get you to work through your calculator. When we're doing the different ways of typing maths, I actually put in the blurb, these are some packages you may want to download and have a look at beforehand. So if you haven't downloaded MathType, here's the link. If you want to practice and be a little bit more familiar before the session, you've got some information there. So they were informal in a way that we would go with the flow with whatever questions they asked. And some of the topics, like we've scheduled complex numbers in early in the semester because that's when it was needed in some courses. But we actually never had anyone who was studying complex numbers come to the session. They came to either look at what are these things, or I want to come every week, I want to get the most out of everything. So they were able to learn a bit about what they were and then ask other questions that they're from what they were studying. We had a lot of, we had some feedback come through about the fact that they enjoyed the sessions, that fact that we actually provided the notes. We actually don't record any of these sessions. I'm not sure if Kate mentioned that earlier or not, but all of our sessions, we want students to be really engaged and not worried about what they say is going to be recorded for other people to listen to or look at later. So we make them very much what the students want at the time. So, and we provide them with the slides at the end so that if they want to download them, they can and keep them for their records. And they've also then got all the links to all the other support services that we offer. So if they go, oh, I want to know about that peer learning, they can click on the link on the peer learning slide. So they've got that access as they go. Thanks for looking after the chat for us, Cristy. So what lessons we've learnt along the way and what we're doing moving forward. We do schedule different topics, particularly for maths, based on the semester, because we have different courses being run at our institution and we want to make sure that it's really tailored to what students are studying. This semester we are trialling a different time. Previously we'd been doing 3 o'clock on a Wednesday, but feedback we'd had in sessions or people saying to us in consultations, oh, I couldn't attend that because that's at kid pickup. I've got to pick up my kids at that time of an afternoon. So we're trialing them at a different time. We did have for our overall online study support program, a session that was in the evening so that we scheduled those for people who were working, as well as throughout the day on different days. We provide the links also through the session so students can actually save the chat as they go through. And we've been doing a lot more promoting. So we actually have information that goes onto our course study desk pages. We liaise closely with our social media people and their coordinator, and they post on the Facebook sites and throughout our social media, and everything is loaded onto the library events calendar. So we've transitioned this from being let's see how this goes to replace drop-ins to business as usual. This is part of what we do each semester. Cristy or Kate, did you want to add anything at this point? No. So I'm going to
couldn't find my
Kate.
mute button had disappeared. It's come again. No, I think you've pretty much covered everything. Unless anybody's got any specific questions, I'm happy to respond there, but I think we're pretty much on time. So been keeping an eye on the chat. Only thing is the evaluation. We're using Patricia Redmond's framework to evaluate this one that's on the line on the screen now, the online engagement framework, because it gives us that more holistic picture. So that's what we use to evaluate the program, or a modified version of that. And these are the questions that we ask students in our little online survey. So it's just a quick link that we provide at the end. Only takes students a couple of minutes to do it. And, you know, we're getting pretty robust feedback, which we each semester feed into a review of our content. So each semester we are tweaking it a little bit. We look at the stats, the numbers, to see, you know, which sessions were well attended. We've given a pretty good revamp this semester coming, or this current semester, and offered, you know, we're offering more sessions of the more popular ones, trimming back the ones that weren't so popular. We have re-looked at our times, that sort of thing, just to see, you know, where we can maximise the opportunities for students to attend. So it's a constant, you know, in a constant state of renewal.